Good afternoon. This is Joe. I'm here at the VFW Pacific Beach, and this is a video for an online class on veteran entrepreneurship. And if you are on the internet, the outline for this class is up at a blog called Veteranentrepreneurship.wordpress.com, and I'll be making reference to that while I go through the class and discuss it. The reason that I'm in a Marine uniform is I'm a former Marine infantry officer. I was a platoon commander, weapons platoon commander, company executive officer, battalion and regimental assistant operations officer. I worked for Jim Mattis when he was a colonel, and John Tulin when he was a lieutenant colonel. They were my last Marine Corps bosses. After that, I went to Stanford for law school, and I also took the MBA classes on finance and entrepreneurship. I went to Harvard undergraduate and went through Marine basic school and IOC in 91, 92. I live here in San Diego, but I travel around and always try to check in at the VFWs. Now, one of the reasons I'm here in front of a television is because this is the place that Veteran TV launched. I'm just watching a episode of Veteran TV. This is a good example of veteran entrepreneurship, also founded by a Marine infantry officer, Donnie O'Malley, who set a very good example of how to scale up and build a veteran business. What I'm going to do with this introductory video is to give a class on what the overview for the class is. The class will consist of 13 two-hour meetings, ideally. It can be tailored to much shorter periods. It could be a half-hour, 1 hour seminar. It could be in multiple formats. The main thing that I will offer for the class is the legal papers for veteran entrepreneurship. And this will be available to recipients who have .mil or .gov US email addresses or .edu addresses for American educational institutions. The legal papers mainly are based on my law practice, my chronological file from when I worked at Paul Hastings in the investment management group, where I set up hedge funds and mutual funds. The Secretary of State was just noting that Iran essentially is running a $95 billion hedge fund. This is the knowledge and scale and scope and landscape of our current era of warfare under the new National Defense Strategy as of 19 January 2018 that Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis published. The class will be based on several books, the most important of which is CNOR, Startup Nation, which is about Israeli entrepreneurship. And after that, it is based on 2 books by Jim Collins, Good to Great, which is one of his most famous books, which is a book that advocates hiring veterans under the section First Who, Then What. And you can specifically go in and look at the reasons that he advocates hiring veterans in that section. And then his other book, Great by Choice and Built to Last. The other book that I will be making constant reference to is The Economist. The Economist newspaper is the best source of intelligence, and 90% of intel is open source intelligence that you can get from a source like The Economist. For a specific part of the class that is directed only to certain educational institutions, specifically Catholic and specifically Jesuit educational institutions, I'll be covering Heroic Leadership 2, which essentially takes the Jesuits as a case study of the type that Professor Collins talks about. For those of us educated by Jesuits, I'll make note that the Jesuit spiritual exercises may provide a very good guide for smart immigration, for building and maintaining what would be called a smart wall here in the era of immigration politics. Especially for people in Central and South America, making reference to an organization like the Jesuit organizations of Central and South America is a way to make smart immigration, and by learning about the Jesuit spiritual exercises, the immigrant can become versed in and capable of excelling within a Jesuit educational institution. There are 25 Jesuit universities in the United States, including Loyola in Los Angeles, which is one of the 10 million plus megacities. For those people in Central and South America who want to immigrate to the United States, a very smart thing to do would be to find the local Jesuit university and then to learn about what is known as the spiritual exercises. And this is an English version of them, and this is a Spanish comic version of them, which is a excellent guide for how to learn about the spiritual life of St. Ignatius of Loyola. For those of you, for those immigrants who are interested in becoming Americans, I think that the best thing you could do is to consider becoming a United States Marine, especially immigrants who are coming from institutions like the Jesuit educational institutions. John Tulin, when I talked to him a couple weeks ago, noted that Jesuits and Marines are basically the same thing. And there are a lot of parallels between the Jesuits and the Marines. The most famous current Marine, Jim Mattis, has been compared to a saint in a iconic image of the so-called warrior monk that a lot of us will buy and put up on our personal space to pay homage, in effect, to a warrior monk that led the Marines through the post 9/11 era successfully and into an era of great power conflict. And my view is that Jim Mattis will probably follow the path of George Shultz in serving in multiple positions within the federal government as a cabinet member. Shultz, you may recall, had 5 different positions as a cabinet member. So I would recommend anyone who's thinking to find the best leadership training in the world to enroll in Marine Officer Candidate School. There are several versions of that, Platoon Leaders class, or if you're in college, Navy ROTC, but it's the best leadership training in the world. The reading for this class is the books that I've mentioned, and the best way, of course, to read now is to download them on audio. Again, Collins, Good to Great, and Great by Choice, Dan Senor, Startup Nation. and The Economist, all of which are available on audio. When I send out this class by email, I will be distributing the links to those files for teaching assistants, so on, in order to facilitate that. But of course, students need to buy their own intellectual property for copyright reasons. I will also be sending out PowerPoint files that are based on Guy Kawasaki's 10 slides that everyone needs to know. SBA, SBIR documents for a pathway towards success for people who participate in the SBA, SBIR program, and document files, .doc files for a sole proprietor, for an LLC, and then document files for a business plan with financials. It can be, usually in the neighborhood of at least 20 pages and sometimes much longer, depending on the exact business plan. We'll be sending out .xls files, Excel files for Department of General Services in the state of California for how to register as a veteran-owned business, and DBO, Department of Business Oversight files for how to have the financials accurate for what's known as GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles in the state of California. But as such, with GAAP files, you'll be able to be consistent throughout the entire business world, including outside the United States. We'll be sending out .qbw files, which are QuickBooks files for veteran businesses at various stages, beginning with small sole proprietor to a longer or larger level of LLC, and for a 501c organization, to include the VFW, to include an organization like the Marines Memorial Club. So those files will come with the email distribution for the course. In terms of distribution, my loyalty is first as a Marine within the Department of Defense. I would invite you to go to the Marine Corps League breakfast on the 4th Sunday of every month at 11, and the 3rd Thursday at 1700 at the VFW post in Mission Valley, and also to the VFW as a whole, to the VA as a whole, but also Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of Education, Department of Treasury, state veteran organizations like CalVet, continental United States universities and high schools, including especially the Jesuit schools, the 25 or so Jesuit universities, the 50 or so Jesuit high schools, known as college preparatories, like my alma mater, St. Ignatius High School, to major corporations, especially those in the S&P 500, which are in ticker SPY, meaning the profession say. And that's the overview of the course. Again, my name is Professor Joseph, Professor Joe. Sometimes to my students south of the border, I'm known as Professor Jose. But I will be glad to see you in person in class for those of you who come to the class. And I should also mention I'll be doing this physically at the Admiral Kidd Base as part of SDMAC, San Diego Military Affairs Council, which is the best of its type in the country for service members who go to that SDMAC, and especially to university students such as those at the nearby University of San Diego and SDSU, which put in a plug, but I believe SDSU may be one of the best schools for veterans in the country. But touch on a couple of points on that at a later point. Thanks very much.